Back in the early days of gaming, I always had a habit of giving the instruction manual that came with the game a good read, and my copy of Pokemon Blue was no exception. One page that caught my attention was the page that showed all 8 gym leaders. As such, while going through the game, I looked forward to meeting each of these individuals, but one stood out to me, the 7th gym leader, Blaine of Cinnabar Island. I was wondering as to why he looked so different here from his artwork within the manual. So today we'll be looking at the mystery surrounding the 2 different designs of the Cinnabar Island gym leader, Blaine. The 2 designs for Blaine are drastically different in every shape and form. One looks like a former soldier, the other a scientist. Glasses, mustache, bald, versus clean-shaven, no specs, and hair. Top that off with one looking a decent amount older than the other. It is clear that the one on the left was the original intended design, but when redesigns happen, they usually retain some element of the original beta design, unless they are, of course, completely different characters, which isn't the case as it was with Final Fantasy XV when Lunafreya effectively replaced Stella, as she was a completely different character and not just a redesign. To add further to the confusion, the Pokemon anime even went ahead and used his older military design rather than his newer scientist attire. This especially had me and many others very confused as to why he looked like this, like he was in the instruction manual rather than his in-game design, which was being used at that point in so many other promotional material outside the anime as well. So what happened here for such a drastic change? Well, first off, my theory here is that this was a late game development change done at practically the last minute, where his artwork didn't even have time to be updated while his sprite was, and the anime might have even gone ahead and just used that artwork in the planning stages even before the game was out as such. Therefore, if it was a late game removal, this is where we crank out the old data mine machine and look into the data of Pokemon Red and Blue, as some clues might still lie around to point us to the whole story of this. And well, we actually got some answers with this. So within the beta cut content of Pokemon Red and Blue, there is data for a class of trainer called Chief, which in the Japanese version of Red and Green is literally called Sylph Chief. This indicates that the Sylph Chief, the obvious man you meet who is the chief of Sylph Code during the Team Rocket raid, was meant to be battled at some point. Hard to say what his story was and why he'd battle you, but that's not exactly the point here. The point is that he was removed, and there is a major significance to his removal. For one, within the data, there is an order for everything from Pokemon to the trainers' names and information. One such order goes trainer class first, and then the one who works for the trainer class second. For example, you have Giovanni, and then you have a Team Rocket grunt lined up right after him. Here, the Sylph Chief in the data has the Scientist class lined up right after him, meaning that the Scientist worked for him too. And if you try to access a battle with the Sylph Chief, it pulls up the Scientist sprite for him, which is odd, as no 2 trainer classes share the same sprite. Therefore, the original sprite of the Sylph Chief was removed and replaced with the Scientist sprite to keep the game from potentially crashing. So what happened to the original battle sprite of the Sylph Chief? It likely became the Blaine battle sprite we faced in-game. And yes, there is more evidence than this here, so hear me out. For one, Blaine's battle sprite has an oddly similar appearance to the Scientist class, which works for the Sylph Chief. Lab coat and glasses, much as how Team Rocket grunts have a similar appearance to Giovanni with the R in the chest and all black. As well, the overworld sprite for the Sylph Chief looks a lot more like Blaine than the one in his own gym did. The one in his own gym was just a simple old man sprite, complete with a bit of hair even and no glasses. Nothing like Blaine, in other words. The Sylph Chief, however, was both completely bald and glasses. In fact, this old man sprite looks a lot more like the old design of Blaine rather than the new Scientist form. This detail is so significant that in Pokemon Yellow, they replaced that old man sprite in Cinnabar Gym with, you guessed it, the literal same sprite of the Sylph Chief. So yes, there is a lot of evidence pointing to Blaine in fact being originally the Sylph Chief, but why did this change even happen in the first place? The theory I can think of is that the idea of battling the Sylph Chief was simply scrapped because it didn't fit within the story of the Team Rocket raid, as he was a hostage and not actually working with Giovanni. So the development team now had a free and rather unique sprite now, and well, team liked it a lot and wanted to reuse it in some form. But where? Well, here is the original design of Blaine, which, looking at this retrospectively, does look like the blandest one of all. Just some old military guy, and not even unique, as Lieutenant Surge already fit the niche of a military guy amongst the gym leaders. So therefore, the old design of Blaine was scrapped, rather last second, in a rush job to the point where the overworld sprite wasn't even altered. Hard to say how last minute this was, but could have, for all we know, been a month before development was complete, considering even after development was complete, they shoved in Mew at the very last second in the debug menu. While none of this is truly concrete, there is a lot of evidence to a mystery that never made a lot of sense in the first place, to just say that it was just a beta design for Blaine and updated to the current version that we have now. Hey everyone, thank you for watching, and welcome to this new cut content series that I'm running on the Obsessive Gamer, as I've been interested in cut content for a very long time, in fact most of my life. Starting with the Zelda days back in the early 2000s, and going further with many other series. So as such, with today's episode about the two different versions of Blaine, comment below on whether this also was confusing for you as a kid on the fact that there was two different designs of Blaines, whether it was the anime versus the video games, the manual of the video game versus the video game itself, or any other sources of course that confused you relating to this, and how it might have confused you too. But I'm planning to return with many more cut content episodes as well. If this interested you below, hit that subscribe button, whether it's top, left, right, bottom, center, whatever, because YouTube's weird like that. And hit that like button, for I like that stuff and it will help me further too. And especially share it, because that will help me even further and even motivate me too. So everyone, thank you for watching.